What's going on, guys? My name is Nadeem, and today let's discuss which units were affected most by the anniversary, right? That means which units were affected most by introduction of Oden, but more importantly, by the introduction of Gold D. Roger, who, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most of the community, is by far the best unit in the game, right? So the way I'll do this is go by class and color. So blue attacker first, then blue defender, then we'll go to red, then we'll go to green, right? So them being green, in theory, means the blue characters, of course, by far were the most affected, right? Both of them are green. So all blue units are worse now, right? So this smoker was a decent unit, now he's worse, right? So the units that were affected most were, of course, Moria is a bit worse now, but Luffy Taro, I think, actually gets some benefit out of this because a lot of the counters of Roger are defenders. So in theory, we might see a lot more defenders in play. So Luffy Taro, he might have some place as a backup character in case the enemy team has a lot of defenders. Of course, Luffy Taro has a trait that increase damage to defenders by 50% in any treasure area. So that's really good. The other unit that I feel like suffered, of course, Buggy. But the two units that benefit are Luffy Law and Shanks. Now, in theory, you might say they're both blue attackers. That's really bad, especially because they both can stun. Yes, they both can stun. And Luffy Law, everything about him is bad against Roger, except one thing. He has the only, I think, skill in the game. Not I think, I know. He's the only character that has recovery block, which Roger really, really, really depends on that recovery block to make him by far the best character. So Luffy Law, if you don't have this thing, is really bad against Roger, of course. But this one skill makes Luffy Law very, very important to have if there's a Roger in the enemy team. Next is Shanks. Now Shanks, in theory, is really bad against Oden, for example, right? And he's fallen off, right? If you look at my tier list, I didn't even put him in the highest tier. However, he deals a lot of damage. And if he hits Roger, he could one-shot Roger. He has a counter. His DPS is nice. Yeah, he has buffs, and Roger is also good against Shanks. But Shanks is also good against Roger. So Shanks, in my opinion, gets a big victory here, especially because a character like Big Mom really struggles against Roger. Next, we'll go through blue runners first. So in terms of blue runners, not really many of these characters were that good. Of course, Bikini Nami and Reiju were decent. Now they fell off a bit. Sanji never got time to shine, but he's still a decent unit. But the big one is Big Mom. Big Mom fell, in my opinion, right? Of course, she was the best runner. Now Odin's the best runner, so that, of course, made her a bit worse. But more importantly, she cannot deal with Roger, right? Roger just tanks her hits really well. With his skill 2, cannot get shocked. He's green. She really struggles against Roger, making her, in my opinion, the one that was affected most and potentially makes her the worst EX in this current meta. Of course, as a unit, she's still fantastic, and she's still, if you don't have an Odin and Roger in the enemy team, potentially still the best unit in the game. But against those two, she's just not good. So she definitely took a big hit here. Next, we'll go through blue defenders. Of course, NL, for example, gets a attack buff, so that's really not good against Roger. Sengoku's, again, not the best. When Nightmare Luffy, for example, got a buff when Runner Big Mom came out, now he just falls off. Perona, of course, still decent because, if you just prevent them from using their skills, they're a lot worse. Roger and Odin. And Roger, for example, needs and that attack buff to take him to the next level. So if she stops him from using his skill 1, he's not getting attack buffs and he's much worse. Now, the two big characters I want to talk about are Ace and Marco and Fuji. Now, they have a lot of damage reduction, right? Here. And yes, Ace's wall gets destroyed by Roger. However, he doesn't buff himself. So Roger doesn't have any damage increase against him or Fuji. And Fuji especially has way more damage increase. So you can make Roger hit you for pretty much no damage, the same way Rayleigh struggled against these units. So yeah, he destroys the wall, but you could just use the wall as a way to heal. And they're both decent units regardless. So I'm really happy to see that Marco Ace, especially Marco Ace, he didn't fall off drastically with the introduction of these units. Of course, Oden still has a good time against them, but all in all, I'd say those two are in good places against Roger. So that's really cool. A lot of damage reduction. Right. Next, we'll go to red because yes, you think in theory red has the best chance, but I think the green element benefited the most. Of course, if you have the Grand Line tag, right? So red units, right? Red attackers are the good ones, right? Sabo, of course, really good against Oden. Drake still decent. They're not power users, so Tashigi Smoker just not that useful. Of course, the big ones are Lucci, who can knock back, right? He's very good against Oden. He can knock him back when he's capturing. His skill is nice. But unfortunately, against Roger, he's not that good because he buffs himself. He has a defense buff and an attack buff, so that's really not good against Roger. And he stuns. So again, that's not good against Roger. But he could still one-shot Roger. So if he does one shot, it works out really well because he gets the defense buff and stuff. But again, if you already have buffs and Roger attacks you, he will also deal really good damage against you. Now, the best one potentially is Zoro, of course. Zoro is really, really good against Oden and Roger, of course, because he has a long range skill, so that can kill Oden when he's capturing. His armed state deals good damage. Of course, if you guys saw Hub's video, yes, in theory, he could deal damage and then Roger heals it all back, but also he could one shot. So he's still a very, very good option against Roger and Oden, and so expect an increase in usage for Zoro especially. Right. Next, we'll go through Red Runners. Red Runners, yeah, this Choppermon is good. He's fun to play with. He's new and stuff. But nah. Kaku, of course, he was like the better or more used Dofi. But now, he's only skill that deals damage stuns, so that's really bad against Roger. And of course, Roger destroys him. And Oden, of course, just simply by existing, Oden does what Kaku does, except on a whole other level. So yeah, definitely Kaku falls. Marco, of course, he's the only one who does his thing, but still Marco's been falling off over time. Law and Snake Man, they deal decent, especially Snake Man. He can really deal well against those two. Law a bit worse, so I'd say Snake Man's a bit better than Law at this current meta against those two greens, but they're both still where they used to be. They're both really, really good, solid options you could use. Now, red defenders, here's where we have more options, right? Uruj and Caesar, they both buff themselves, so they're not the best against Roger. But I will say this: Caesar, having that poison, unless he's using skill 2, he will still take poison damage, which over time stacks up a lot. So Caesar is still very viable, of course. Kinemon doesn't buff himself, and Blackbeard has some buffs, but Kinemon and Blackbeard probably your best options here. I'd say the blue defender in Fuji still deals better than these red defenders against Roger, right? So Blackbeard, of course, still usable, and Kinemon still, but again, Odin, has the extra stuff against that. And Blackbeard, they're both not Devil Fruit users, so again, Blackbeard deals less damage. So yeah. That's that for the red units, but the green ones, let's start with the runners. Of course, Perona, if she hits her Ghost like the timeskip Perona, then Roger, of course, cannot do much. This guy, Croc, really, really cool. Of course, he's the only one that can flank. So he's the only one that can do what he does at the level he does it. Marco and Kisaru don't do it at his level. So I'd say he's still good, but of course, Odin's much better. So he falls off a bit, but in certain maps like Sabodi, like Fishman Island, he can clutch in a victory. So if that's what you care about, you could potentially just cheese it out with Odin and Crocodile, depending on the map. Song King, of course, still good as he used to be. And Ivankov, big buff for Ivankov. I've been saying this, if you guys watch my tier list with Roman, we 100%, we keep saying, Ivankov just keeps getting better because Ivankov is the only one that can cancel buffs, I think. And I'm pretty sure he's the only one. And so many units are coming out with buffs, right? Urush came out with buffs. Lucci came out with buffs. Now Roger and Shanks especially, Roger comes out with so many buffs. He just removes it, and then when they can start buffing again, they have to start all over. So Ivankov is very, very nice, especially if you give him the Grand Line trait. He has more damage reduction. You need green Grand Line traits against Roger. So you gotta get the Grand Line traits. I don't know how, and I don't care how, just get it. Right? Next we have the green attackers. Of course, if we look here, Kuzan, if he gets the freeze off, if Roger's not using skill 2, the freeze could potentially deal a lot of damage, right? The healing freezing thing. Kaido buffs himself, so Kaido's still decent, but Roger and Rayleigh are on a whole other level, so they're still decent somewhat. The rest not really that usable. Cavendish, you sometimes see some usage out of him, but yeah. So finally, the best characters to deal with Roger are these green defenders. So Kid unfortunately buffs himself, so that's not good against Roger. The others aren't that usable. Hina is okay, I guess, still where she's at. But the big three that benefit a lot, Big Mom. This Big Mom actually deals really well with Roger. She doesn't buff herself unless she shocks someone, so just don't shock Roger, and you will tank his hits really well. But the big two, Katakuri and Mihawk, especially Mihawk. Oh my god, is Mihawk really, 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 really good in this meta, right? So they both have almost full damage reduction. Roger deals very little damage to them. Actually, let me go back and showcase the locked units I have. And so Magellan, of course, a decent option. Rayleigh still good. Boa unfortunately falls off. Just not much you can do in this meta. It's Luffy's and Green's. It's not good. Komatsu, he's fun. I want to see more of him, but I think he's gonna be solid, just not against Roger. And Kiku can one-shot Roger in the last minute. So if you have a Kiku as a backup, if you're using a blue defender with a back and you want to use mono blue, potentially over Luffy Taro, if you have Kiku max level, she's really good. She can one shot, especially in that last minute. She's dangerous. So yeah, Oden and Roger, of course, define this meta, right? So if we look at this team, right, I need Grand Line, right? I don't care what other traits you want, put Grand Line. Green Grand Line, right? Because reduced damage received from enemies that are the same color. So if you're using green, you need Grand Line trait. And it just works out really well. So I'm using this team, right? Monocolor, mono roll is not the best thing to do, but I'm just having so much fun right now. I couldn't care less. Of course, it's not going to be my main team. I'm actually going to use this as soon as I hit SS to showcase Barto. So that'd be cool. But anyways, these are the units that I think are very, very good against the characters we have in this meta. Of course, any red unit gets some sort of buff, right? Like Blackbeard and Caesar and stuff. They're still usable, this law as well. But these are the best units, right? Mihawk, Katakuri, Zoro, Luffy Law, Fuji, Shanks, Snake Man, Ivankov, Big Mom, Ace Marco, Lucci, and Ace. They're probably, sorry, not Ace, Sabo. They're probably the best to deal with Blackbeard. So every character here, these 12, in my opinion, are the best counters to Roger, and some of them also work really well against Oden. Of course, remember that like the defenders, they don't, they're not as good against Oden, for example, but they're still very good units like Mihawk and Katakuri, so they will still do a good job against Oden. Just this is really focused on Roger because he's the really, really big pain in the ass here. Of course, anyone with knockback or long range skills, is better off against Oden. So yeah, that's that video, guys. Hopefully this helped in helping you decide who you want to power up, who you want to level up. If you do not want to use Roger or Oden, or if you want to use Oden and know who to back up Oden, it could be one of those green defenders, man. That's probably your best option. If you want to do dual runner green, I don't recommend dual runner, but if you do dual runner and green, maybe even Cove. Maybe even Cove. If you really struggle against Roger, because Roger also counters Odin, by the way. So Odin is not good against Roger. So yeah, keep that in mind, guys. Hopefully this was enjoyable. Hopefully this was helpful. I'm planning on making an account showcase and an EX tier list tomorrow or after tomorrow, or maybe both days, and just have two videos out. And I have some other ideas that I want to do as well. Yeah, this video, on the other hand, it's fantastic to make. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed discussing the state of the meta and stuff. So yeah, hopefully this was nice, and peace.